Throughout history, there is a question that can never be fully answered. What happens after we die? In the lands between, we do know what happens somewhat. Death is but the catalyst to a rebirth, but one that is subject to the grace of the Erdtree. One that not everyone is chosen to have. The Erdtree governs the rebirth of those who perish. But what of the time before the Erdtree? Well, like there are many beliefs of what happens after death, there were many things that governed death, and even the existence of a world beyond death. But were those that governed death good, neutral, or maybe even evil? Was the creation of the Erdtree to control death and rebirth a way to improve the lives of those who lived in the lands between? Or was it a way to usurp power from the world beyond life? Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the spirit world of Elden Ring and how the Erdtree basically took over the spirit world indirectly. As you might know if you've watched any lore video that talks about the world of Elden Ring or the Erdtree, death isn't really a thing in the lands between, up until we released the Rune of Death by slaying Malekith the Black Blade. This is due to the sealing of the Rune of Death, making it so death essentially is controlled in the lands between, and quote-unquote true death was only possible when the Erdtree absorbs you, body and soul, or if you were killed by Malekith himself. You are then reborn by the Erdtree's grace, but as we also know, the Erdtree didn't exist long ago. So what happened to the souls that died before? As always, this is very much open to speculation since it's lore that takes place before the game, and this is more of a theory than an actual lore video. But before the Erdtree, death and rebirth took many forms, often weirdly tying itself to outer gods such as the rebirth through deathbed companions, decay and rebirth through the Scarlet Rot, and the kind of death through the Deathbirds. There are more than that, but we'll save those for another time. Now, there are a lot of interesting things about the lore of how death works in the lands between, but where I want to speculate on is the spirit world, something that we don't really get to see or even hear about throughout the game. However, the Helfen Steeple Greatsword tells us that there is indeed a spirit world, and the Greatsword itself was patterned after lampwood, which guides the dead within the spirit world. In addition, it also reads that the lamplight that these lampwood would emit are similar to grace in appearance, and that only those who met their death in battle can see it. To me, this requirement sort of reminds me of the remembrances generated by the Erdtree, as remembrances are usually created for great warriors. So the Erdtree might be somewhat similar to these lampwood, in that it guides warriors through remembrances. It might even be that the Erdtree is copying the lamplight as grace. So it might be a little far-fetched, but we can already see how the Erdtree somewhat replaces some aspects of this spirit world. Now, the existence of a spirit world is very interesting and changes quite a few of my thoughts about certain things in the lands between, and raises even more questions, such as how would one get to the spirit world now that the Erdtree took over death? Or was the creation of the Erdtree intended to control the passage of spirits to the spirit world? Or is the spirit world just another manifestation of the lands between, and the lampwood is actually the Erdtree itself? Or is the lands between a place in between the spirit world and another world? Unfortunately, I don't have many answers for those questions today, but I do want to speculate on some of it. Now first, a little bit of speculation between true death and the spirit world. What if true death is the only way to enter the spirit world, and due to the Erdtree and the sealing of the Rune of Death, no more spirits could enter the spirit world, and the Erdtree might also be blocking rebirth through the spirit world itself, which may also be the reason why there are many spirits stuck within the lands between, unable to be rebirthed or to move on. as they aren't chosen by the Erdtree and are unable to move on to the spirit world. So maybe by dying a true death through the Rune of Death, one would be able to cross the threshold into another world. And it might even be that Godwin's soul is within the spirit world itself. So in addition to that speculation, I wanted to go back to a certain old theory within Castle's soul. There is a spirit who is praying and finding a way for the sun to be swallowed in order for the soul of a soulless demigod to come back. Many speculated that this might be Godwin the Golden, and it may very well be. The spirit was attempting this as it was an order given to him by Miquella the Unalloyed. What if the purpose of such an order was to enter the spirit world somehow? There are many beliefs of what an eclipse could bring, such as an omen of the end of the world according to the Bible, or in witchcraft, it's a time when the walls between the spirit world and the material world become thin. In the lands between, it is believed that an eclipse can stave off destined death. But how? Well, I think of two things. Perhaps the eclipse blocks passage towards the spirit world, or more likely, the eclipse allows passage between the spirit world and the lands between, which is why Miquella wanted this to occur so Godwin, or whoever Miquella might be finding, might be able to find his way back to the lands between from the spirit world. This could even further assist in his research to overthrow the Erdtree, as is my theory with what he was doing with the Halig tree. But that's just a theory. I have no proof of it. It's just a random thing that I thought was very interesting. It's just interesting to think that Miquella might know so much more than any other character in the lands between, but he couldn't act on it because he was a child, essentially. Maybe his powers didn't grow because of his curse. Instead, he made it up with his intelligence and his charisma. Kind of like a certain character in a certain manga. But now let's talk about why the Greater Will created the Erdtree, and why would Queen Marika want to seal the Rune of Death, both preventing access or even rebirth through the spirit world, which I assume is the normal means of rebirth. Now, I think the obvious answer would be that they wanted to take control of the lands between, as we already know that the Greater Will and those under it aren't exactly a group anyone would consider good. But just for fun, let's take a look at it from a different perspective. As I mentioned before, death and rebirth came in many forms before the Erdtree, and most of them are through the influence of an outer god, and even something like the Crucible. So it's hard to say which one for certain is the natural course of rebirth. So it might be that it wasn't just the Greater Will who was attempting to overthrow or harness the power of the spirit world. Examples include things like the Scarlet Rot, which we already know from all the videos talking about Malenia and Miquella, that the Scarlet Rot is a form of decay and rebirth, which would create the Children of Rot. Another example is the Deathbirds, who also serve an outer god. Its envoy was a creature with the visage of twin birds. This envoy was the mother of the Deathbirds, and its rite of burning the dead with ghost flame was seen as a malevolent act. As such, this outer god was also believed to be a malevolent god. And as mentioned, even the Scarlet Rot was seen as a malevolent plague. So basically, before the Erdtree, dying kinda sucked in the lands between. And looking at it now, the Erdtree doesn't seem all that bad. I mean, it beats rotting away piece by piece while feeling every bit of agony as your body crumbles into nothing. Or even your soul getting burned in ghost flame to be turned into vengeful spirits. This might even be why a lot of people are all for the idea of being rebirthed by the Erdtree, and some of the spirits that we can talk to are patiently waiting for their time. It may be one of the reasons why the people of the lands between flock to the Golden Order. So there's a possible benevolence to the birth of the Erdtree, even though it's pretty unlikely to be the case since the Erdtree chooses who gets rebirth and who doesn't. Perhaps the most benevolent would have been Miquella's Halig tree, but we'll never see it come to fruition. Thanks, Moog. One last thing I want to bring up is the ancient death rituals carried out by the people of the lands between. It may even have been in service to the Deathbirds, and those who failed these rituals were the ones stoked in their kilns. The ancient feathered talismans that talk about this tells us that it was a talisman used in ancient death rituals. The heart sings when one draws close to death, and thus does one cling so tenaciously to life, to render up a death worth offering. These rituals may have been a type of ritual combat in order to gain the favor of the lamplights of the Helfen in the spirit world. Because remember, you have to die in battle in order for the lamplight to guide you through the spirit world. These rituals may have taken place before the Erdtree and continued even after its appearance, lending credence to the idea that the Erdtree took over the spirit world's place, as the people were expecting that it would run in a similar way. It's speculation, but the ritual sword and ritual shield talismans talk about a ritual combat and has the opposite effect of the feathered talisman. Instead of needing low health, you needed max health for it to work. The practice died out though by the time Radagon had become king consort. Maybe he actually told the people that it doesn't work that way. It's kinda unfortunate that we almost don't have any other information of the spirit world other than the Helfen Steeple, as it's such an interesting topic that I hope gets expanded on maybe in an upcoming DLC with Miquella, if the spirit world even is part of Miquella's plan. Now, there are a lot of other things that I want to talk about that's a little off topic, such as the draining of colors, the Deathbirds, the Deathbed Companions, and the Prince of Death possibly serving an outer god of death because of how their sorcery symbols are all similar, and other stuff like that, but I'm going to save those for future videos. What do you guys think though? What is the significance of the spirit world in Elden Ring, and is the Erdtree the lesser evil when it comes to rebirth? Did the Greater Will have some benevolent motive in creating the Erdtree, or was it just all a ploy in order to get the humans of the lands between to side with the Golden Order? Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.